My name is Isabella Romano, and I am 35 years old. For as long as I can remember, my life has revolved around the Romano Royal, our family's grand but fading hotel on the golden shores of Miami Beach. To outsiders, the Royal was a place of glittering chandeliers, arched marble hallways, and echoes of old-world European charm. To me, it was both a palace and a prison, a building that demanded my loyalty, my youth, and my soul. I gave it everything I had, and in return, it gave me heartbreak, betrayal, and the kind of scars you cannot see but will always feel. The Romano Royal was born long before me. My grandfather, Lorenzo Romano, immigrated from Naples in 1950 with nothing but suits and a dream. He worked as a porter at a grand New York hotel, polishing shoes and carrying bags for wealthy travelers. But he always told people he was studying the business. Every detail fascinated him. The way guests were greeted, the crisp uniforms of the staff, the way chandeliers were cleaned at dawn so they sparkled by dusk. He believed hospitality was not just a job, but a royal duty, the chance to treat every guest like nobility. In 1968, after saving every dollar and partnering with a small group of Italian investors, Lorenzo bought an aging Art Deco hotel in Miami. It was modest, only 40 rooms, but he envisioned a palace by the sea. With his wife, Maria, he restored it with marble imported from Carrara and ironwork designed by Florentine craftsmen. He hung oil paintings of the Italian countryside in every hallway and filled the lobby with fresh orchids every morning. Guests were not just customers, they were family, and many returned year after year. By the late 1970s, the Romano Royal was thriving, known for its elegance and warmth. My father, Antonio, grew up in the hotel. He polished silver, carried trays, and memorized every guest's name. But while he respected the hotel, he did not love it the way Nano did. He dreamed of expansion, of making the Royal into a chain that stretched across America. He studied business at Cornell, married my mother Elena, and returned to Miami with big ambitions. By the 1990s, under his management, the hotel expanded to 100 rooms with a new spa, rooftop pool, and ballroom that hosted weddings and galas. The Romano Royal became a jewel of Miami Beach, a destination for celebrities and politicians. And then there was me. From the time I could walk, I was part of the hotel. My earliest memories are of racing through the hallways, hiding under banquet tables, and sneaking pastries from the kitchen. By the age of 10, I knew how to set a dining table perfectly. At 14, I shadowed the front desk clerks, learning the art of check-ins and the importance of a warm smile. At 16, while my friends spent summers at the beach, I worked in housekeeping, scrubbing bathrooms and making beds with hospital corners. While they chased hands and boyfriends, I chased perfection in the details of our guests' experience. But there was always someone else in the story, my older brother, Marco. If I was the worker bee, Marco was the golden child. Handsome, charming, and effortlessly confident, he could stroll into the lobby and light up the room. Guests adored him, and my parents adored him even more. Where I was serious, Marco was playful. Where I was dedicated, Marco was visionary. He was given freedom, indulgence, and praise, even though he rarely did more than flirt with guests and sip cocktails by the pool. My parents believed Marco would be the heir to the Romano Royal, the future king of the palace. Still, I did not let it deter me. I pursued my education with relentless determination. I studied hospitality management at Cornell, graduating with honors. I worked internships at the Ritz-Carlton in New York and the Peninsula in Paris. While Marco was partying in Ibiza or gambling in Monaco, I was memorizing wine pairings, studying architecture, and mastering the psychology of guest satisfaction. Every experience shaped me, preparing me to one day lead the Romano Royal into a new era. When I returned to Miami after graduation, the hotel was struggling. The once grand palace had faded with time. Competition from newer luxury resorts was fierce, and occupancy rates had dropped. The carpets were worn, the chandeliers dulled, and the ballroom sat empty to many weekends. My father was exhausted, my mother overwhelmed. Marco, of course, was nowhere to be found. That was when I stepped in. I took a modest role at first, assistant manager of guest services, but quickly, my fingerprints were everywhere. I updated our staff training program, teaching housekeepers to leave handwritten notes for guests, training servers to remember birthdays, and personally greeting VIP arrivals at midnight if necessary. I oversaw a renovation of the rooms, replacing heavy drapery with light linens, installing rainfall showers, and creating suites themed around Italian regions. Guests raved about the Amalfi Suite and the Tuscan Villa Room. Most importantly, I brought modern strategy. I forged partnerships with travel influencers, created digital marketing campaigns, and developed packages that combine spa treatments, yacht rentals, and fine dining. Slowly, the Royal began to shine again. Reviews on TripAdvisor climbed, occupancy rose, and within 5 years, our revenues doubled. The Romano Royal was once again a palace, and I, Isabella, was the queen behind the throne. But still, my parents did not crown me. They spoke of my hard work, yes, but always with a caveat. Marco will bring the royal into the future, they said at family dinners, as if repeating a prophecy. I bit my tongue, burying my hurt, telling myself that someday they would see. I kept working, kept building, kept proving my worth. By my 35th birthday, I had transformed the Romano Royal into one of the top boutique hotels in Miami. Travel magazines featured us. Celebrities posted selfies in our rooftop pool. Our annual gala raised hundreds of thousands for charity. I had given my heart, my body, my youth to this palace. And then, just as I secured the opportunity of a lifetime, my parents handed my throne to Marco. But that betrayal, that coronation of the wrong king, comes later in the story. For now, know this. I built a palace with my bare hands, only to be exiled from it. And when they came begging for my help, I gave them the same cold line that became my revenge. Talk to your king. My story turns dark on the night of our grandest victory. After years of struggle, sacrifice, and sleepless nights, I had secured a deal that promised to make the Romano Royal the crown jewel of Miami once more. A global luxury travel agency, Solstice Voyages, chose our hotel to be the exclusive Miami property in their platinum portfolio. It was a contract worth nearly $2 million annually, guaranteeing international guests, elite events, and prestige that would rival even the Ritz. For me, it was not just a business deal. It was validation, the proof that all my labor had not been in vain. The signing was scheduled for a Friday evening, in our ballroom that sparkled brighter than ever. I had overseen every detail, from the gilded invitations to the caviar and champagne. Journalists were present, photographers poised, influencers live streaming. When the CEO of Solstice took my hand and praised the Royal as a palace reborn, I felt years of exhaustion melt away. My parents smiled, proud but restrained, and for once, I allowed myself to hope they finally saw me. But then, the announcement came. As the applause faded, my father raised his glass. He cleared his throat, his eyes shining with the kind of pride I had longed for since childhood. Tonight, he said, we celebrate not only this historic partnership, but also the future of the Romano Royal. I felt my heart swell, expecting to hear my name. Instead, his next words shattered me. We are proud to announce, my father declared, that Marco Romano will assume the role of Chief Executive Officer of the Romano Royal, guiding us into the next generation. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, and my brother, Marco, emerged from the shadows like a prince returning from exile. He was tanned, smiling, dressed in a white linen suit that screamed careless elegance. He waved as though he were royalty, accepting a crown he had not earned. I stood frozen, champagne flute trembling in my hand. My mother leaned in, her voice soft as silk but sharp as a knife. This is what's best for the family, Isabella. You've done a wonderful job keeping the hotel alive, but leadership requires vision, charisma, a touch of magic that only Marco has. Her words sliced me open, invalidating years of labor with a single breath. They did not see my vision, my magic, my sacrifices. To them, I was the servant of the palace, never its queen. Marco embraced me before the cameras, whispering in my ear with a smugness only I could hear. You did all the hard work, sis. Now I'll take it from here. My blood boiled. But I forced a smile for the flashing cameras. I could not let them see me break. Not yet. In the days that followed, Marco was crowned in every sense. His face appeared in magazines as the new face of Miami hospitality. Guests gushed about his charm. Investors showered him with attention. And my parents basked in his glow. I was reduced to the shadows, a mere operations officer stripped of authority, stripped of dignity. The very staff I had trained now looked past me, awaiting Marco's orders. It was as though my decade of devotion had been erased overnight. I wanted to scream, to fight, to demand justice, but something inside me stilled, a voice whispering that true revenge is not loud, it is silent, patient, devastating. So I swallowed my anger and continued to work. I ensured the Solstice contract launched smoothly, managed staff, resolved crises. Marco strutted through the lobby like a peacock, but I was still the one ensuring the palace did not collapse. And all the while, resentment grew in me like fire beneath ice. 6 months later, the cracks began to show. Marco was charming, yes, but reckless. He spent lavishly on parties, free champagne for influencers, and extravagant rooftop concerts that drained our budget. He ignored maintenance, let staff schedules fall apart, and dismissed long-serving employees for younger faces. Guests began to complain about long waits, dirty rooms, and careless service. Online reviews slipped, occupancy dipped, and the palace I had rebuilt began to crumble under his careless reign. My parents still defended him. They insisted Marco was learning, that he needed time, that he had ideas I could never understand. But investors grew restless. Solstice executives demanded answers, and I could see the disappointment creeping into their smiles. I knew then that the fall was coming, and when it did, I would not cushion it. The breaking point came with the Royal Gala, our signature annual event. This gala had been my pride, a glittering evening of charity, fine dining, and international press coverage. Under my management, it had raised hundreds of thousands for children's hospitals and earned us global recognition. Marco, in his arrogance, decided to reinvent it. He turned it into a neon-lit spectacle with DJs, fashion shows, and influencers waving champagne bottles. It was no longer a gala. It was a circus. The disaster was broadcast across social media. Guests left early, outraged donors withdrew, and headlines mocked the Romano Royal as a palace-turned-nightclub. Solstice executives pulled me aside the next day, their faces grim. They told me they had expected elegance, class, stability. They did not sign with Marco, they signed with me, and if things continued this way, they would withdraw entirely. I returned home that night, my heart heavy but strangely calm. My parents still refused to listen, still blinded by Marco's shallow glow. They told me to support him, to stop criticizing, to remember that family comes first. But I realized something crucial. To them, family meant Marco, not me. I was a pawn in their game, useful only when convenient, and pawns, when they reach the other side of the board, can become queens, but only if they escape. That was the night I made my decision. I would not fight for the throne anymore. I would not beg for recognition or love. I would walk away quietly, gracefully, and leave them to the ruin they had chosen. I knew they would come crawling back when the walls fell, and when they did, my revenge would be simple, cold, and final. I packed my things in silence, my uniforms, my notebooks, my binders full of plans and budgets. I left the hotel that I had built into a palace, the palace that had betrayed me. I moved into a small apartment overlooking the bay, humble but mine. And for the first time in years, I slept peacefully, free from the weight of the crown I was never allowed to wear. But the story does not end there, for while I walked away, the palace I left behind began to burn. And when they begged me to return, when they offered me the throne, I gave them nothing but my silence and my coldest smile. Talk to your king, I told them, and those 4 words became my crown, my revenge, my freedom. My departure from the hotel felt like severing a vein. I had poured so much of myself into its walls, its chandeliers, its carpets, its people. But once I was gone, I felt an unexpected liberation, like chains snapping open. I no longer had to prove my worth to those who refused to see it. I no longer had to serve a throne that had never been mine. At first, I kept quiet, working freelance as a consultant for smaller boutique hotels. My knowledge, my systems, my discipline, these were skills others valued immediately. Owners who had once envied my family's palace now sought me eagerly. They gave me respect, gratitude, and freedom. It was a sharp contrast to the dismissal and betrayal I had endured. Meanwhile, the Romano Royal spiraled. Marco's arrogance became infamous across Miami's elite circles. He threw parties more lavish than ever, bleeding funds into spectacles that impressed no one. Employees fled in droves, fed up with his temper and chaos. Guest complaints turned into lawsuits, and 5-star reviews became 1-star warnings. The palace I had built was rotting under his reign, and my parents were too proud to admit it. I did not gloat publicly. I kept my silence, my dignity. watching from a distance as the once glittering royal became a cautionary tale. Investors began pulling out, creditors circled like vultures, and journalists who once praised Marco now ridiculed him. The headlines were merciless, calling him the Prince of Ruin for every insult he received. I remembered his whisper, "You did all the hard work, sis. Now I'll take it from here." My parents finally called me, their voices softer than I had ever heard. They asked me to return, to help, to save the legacy of our family. They promised me authority this time, respect, even ownership shares. But I remembered every wound, every dismissal, every time they crowned Marco king while I was treated as a servant. I remembered how they had chosen him at the height of my greatest achievement, and I realized they were not asking me to lead. They were begging me to clean up the mess. I looked at the phone, at the trembling voice of my mother on the line, and I answered with 4 words, cold and final, "Talk to your king." The silence on the other end told me my words had struck harder than any scream ever could. For the first time, they felt the weight of their choices. Months passed, and the royal went bankrupt. The creditors seized the property. The solstice contract was terminated, and the great Romano name became synonymous with failure. The marble halls turned dark. The chandeliers collected dust, and the palace I once nurtured closed its doors forever. My parents were humiliated. Marco disappeared to Europe, fleeing debts and disgrace. The empire they had denied me was ashes. Some said I should have returned, should have saved the hotel for the sake of family. But why should I save a family that had never saved me? Why should I restore a palace that had cast me out of its crown hall? No, my revenge was not destruction. My revenge was absence. Without me, their kingdom could not stand, and that truth was the sharpest blade of all. I built something new instead. With the knowledge I carried, I opened my own boutique hotel, small but exquisite, perched by the bay with golden balconies and a rooftop garden. It was not vast like the royal, but it was mine, built on my terms, with my name carved into its doors. Guests loved it, staff adored me, investors respected me, and slowly, I became what I was always meant to be, a queen, but of my own empire. Sometimes guests would mention the Romano Royal. They would sigh about how glorious it had been, how sad its fall was, and they would ask me if I had any connection to it. I would smile faintly and say once, a long time ago. They never guessed the full truth, and I never offered it. My revenge was not in boasting, but in thriving where they had cast me aside. Marco never returned. I heard whispers of him drifting from country to country, burning through what little money he had left. My parents shrank into obscurity, once proud rulers now forgotten. They lived in the shadows of their own ruin, while I walked in the light of my success. It was justice. It was balance. It was the quiet revenge I had always dreamed of. Sometimes, late at night, I remember the girl who had scrubbed carpets, balanced books, and begged for recognition. I remember her tears, her loneliness, her yearning to be loved by those who never saw her, and I whispered to her across time, "You are free now. You are your own crown." The pain made me sharp, the betrayal made me strong, and the silence made me queen. My palace may be smaller, but it is mine, every brick built on my strength, not borrowed approval. So if you ever ask me what became of the Romano Royal, I will tell you this. It was a palace, yes, but palaces built on lies will always crumble. And if you ask me what became of the forgotten daughter who kept it alive, I will say this. She rose from the ashes, not to reclaim the old throne, but to build her own, for revenge is not always about destroying your enemies. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is simply walking away and watching them collapse without you. And as I stand on the balcony of my hotel, watching the city lights glitter across the bay, I raise my glass to the ruins of the royal, not with sorrow, not with bitterness, but with triumph, for they crowned the wrong king, and in their blindness, they lost everything. And I, the servant they dismissed, became the queen of my own kingdom, crowned not by them, but by destiny. And that is my story, my betrayal, my revenge, and my freedom.